I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Now today's oysters are from the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, said that Russia had been trying to persuade the situation. Tied up with Russian-Ukrainian guilt for an hour. And to get me a tough one from the point of view of the president, with the words received in the state, as you mark, and about the fact that Russia could not occupy a serious territory for serious spending, and overgrown. So it sounded like his oysters from the president now. Of course. Well, it is known, it is possible that this will be the line of the president from the received states during the coming political period. Tilki is an important torture on the behavior. And President Donald Trump is also being elected for protesting Putin. In a situation, the way we pump is absolutely not elected to the hearing, to the idea. In May, he will complete the blame. Well, we found the right moment again with the oyster itself from President Recep and Erdogan. Kola Trump, saying that Maya had bought Russian nafta. And this can be said to be an obvious continuation, saying that NATO members are buying Russian nafta for Ukraine, and that we are trying to make the powers members of the European Union here. I am, let's say, a cleaner and a Slovakian. In Asia, it's not so important to have a moment with the president. I'm going to hang out at the sanctions, tied up from the days of the dump. It doesn't look like it's so much to say that the Russian war was bought in the country itself. From Tilka, the problem is that with the truth, Trump can get both Turchin and cleaners. And Previv his old friend Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and Russian nafta, is a serious blow to the budget of the Russian Federation. Shitting on and gas on the Turkish way gaskin. And by the hour, the Russian Federation has carried out its gas supplies to the cleaning service on the route. And I want to click on the ideas of Ukraine and European Ukraine, another sorcery idea from the side, and Russia and cleaning. Another gas through the gas transportation system, tied from Ukraine through the Ukrainian gas transportation system, Maya and you. And this is really important at such moments, tied up from those still from the yak are not up to the Russian energy carriers. The fact that you did not transport nafta through the Ukrainian gas transportation system in the recent past. It was respected, and just a fortune-telling act on it is clear that it is not up to Ukraine. And the PPR is Ukraine itself. It does everything so that Russian energy is not supplied via the gas transportation system. Because I demand buckets to say more on Kola, we respected Putin by transit of gas through the Ukrainian GTS. Financing our budget, we overnight financed the guilt of the protest, the preparation of Russia to guilt. And at the same time, Ukraine NATO Europe buys Russian gas, buys Russian naphtha, buys Russian car products, and car products in China. India from Russian naphtha and finance. I am absolutely happy to say that President Trump is financing a war against the very SB. And it's not like my voice is absolutely draining yet. I have curtailed to the point that, having said today at the session of the UN General Assembly, the head of the Russian foreign policy virus zone Sergei Lavrov, said that in his mind for NATO, Russia's war is Russia's war, not Russia's war on Russia by the hands of Ukraine, and continue so. Firm the point of view of Russian political roots, firm Putin's point of view, firm Lavrov's point of view. Firm the point of view of a million in there and powerful. And here I would not like that there is a deception in the mood of the Russian voice to blame. Russia and Russia Yak defends. And I will continue to work. Without the Russian NAFTA reaching India and China, it is hardly possible to change a serious Russian Federation with a budget. India, she holds the Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi, continuing when hiring on the words of a longtime pal of Donald Trump. The President is mostly in the state, and the Prime Minister in India is elected to meet. I just got information today about the fact that India is on with the received experience in the battle of replacing Russian NAFTA with Venezuelan, Iranian. NAFTA, it turns out, are under sanctions from those received in the state. India does not have a lot of economical maneuvers of the Ukrainian economy, with sprats for the needs of crafts. India is extremely needful and cheap, it cannot afford expensive NAFTA, it can allow Ukraine to enter. It is not a joke of a premium product in NAFTA, but a joke of a premium arrival for sale on automotive products in Yaki. From cheap to India, absolutely with the knowledge of the mountain, Russia cannot sell the road to NAFTA to the fact that its aggression against our Ukraine comes with sanctions in order to get cheaper for expensive automotive products. And does not leave Russia like that, then India wants so that I would allow from Venezuela and Iran jealously and the mountains and themselves. Well, that's it again. China is still greedy for the Russian Federation, for the fact that I will not be there, and NAFTA. You choose the weight, and with the received states, and choose to dilute, and about the fact that the Russian on were pumping. The Chinese officials said that sovereign Ukraine, not America yet, I will embroider them. So here Tesh I have such a moment to pass, it is necessary for all of us to say, and the situation, tied up with Donald Trump. Extremely extortionate of Ukraine, NATO, and the supplies have purchased Russian NATO, correctly and morally. It is extremely correct to tell the Europeans everything that we have bought on auto products from India, China. And finance is the blame. You will solve the very problem that India, China, is an honest market, including the domestic market for the Russian one. And the solidary politicians of the global pub cannot accept the blame from President Putin. Then who will hear without a budget, and without Hromadians, I was given to pay pennies for the fate of their discarded son in the Russian Federation away. Trump is about that, and about the fact that the Russian won on the Ukrainian side, and firm a practical point of view. It is rich on the feet. Change Trump's reputation and elect aggressors, the yak of Ukraine. Dreams are really important, yak on me. Russia is talking about the NATO war. It's not just talking, but it's really expanded the blame. And yet, you do not give up 100 by such an obvious fact. And I'm still in 2020 other Kola Richley, who talked about the completion of Russian-Ukrainian guilt in a short period. I'm Nicola, not in the subject, not like and proving that I started the guilt, and will be richly printed. You can do this absolutely incredibly complex task, as you know. The fact that you are developing everywhere ends that the Russian-Ukrainian nation is just firing the starting pistol at Europe's trials and retinue. It would be extremely difficult for him to complete the guilt at the stage of 2022. And from the point of view of both before and temples at the approach of his fate, it could be said that we are entering the Shlyak without guilt on the European continent, without a chance to bring her the situation normally. I can't even dream of those chances. And we call it simply with posterogity for yak oncology. This is essentially oncology. We are already giving metastases. Something else will be punished there. The epicenter of all and puffy Ukraine. Then this stasis at a time will be everywhere in a healthy so-called organism, infecting the European continent and reducing Europeans to really meaningful prospects of the Myra Mabit. And Tilky Cobb go. What's the Cobb in? To the fact that, in principle, Kola, all the blame began. The Russians did not have such a rich diet from the point of view of Ukraine. There was not enough open conflict with Ukraine and a member of NATO. We are, of course, a conflict of a nuclear power with a nuclear bloc, Vagit nuclear blame for the Oval strategic nuclear dump. And still pretend New York and Moscow are arresting you, quote, Russian propagandist Kisilyev, Rada radioactive Popol. But it is extremely so. I will still be both a strategic nuclear strike, and no one will seem a little in those places. Extremely Russians are beaten to the fact that pok, but on buckets they will say that there is still a chain, there is still wine. And after 3.5 Rocky, after 4, through Rocky in guilt, and it will be compensated for the imperious wine Shlyak. To the judgment of self-preservation and the law of history. And that's why the peoples of the Gickel firm the ethnographic map of the retinue, so it wouldn't be their Nicola and Bulow. And those could be the victims of aggressors, aggression, and the aggressors themselves to those who cannot. So it may be so. At the beginning of the period, I am the Russian Viska, the cordon of Ukraine in NATO, giving birth to such guilt, despite the fact that the Russian army itself was being cut in terms of temple technologies. A member of NATO. And the appearance of an army of drones in the Ukrainian and Russian windy space before Karen replaced the war with Tilky. And civilization itself from the point of view and further away, and I would say, not a happy share for the soul. And the parliamentary moment, in principle, by signing the contract, we began to conduct intelligence on the European continent, in the apparatus of the Ukrainian special services. To the fact that on the eve of the launch of drones in the territory of Ukraine, Ukraine has washed away the worn-out infrastructure, as well as on terror, I started from the Russian payback of the Ukrainian one. Announced the launch of drones on enemy territory from the point of view of its powerful military infrastructure facilities. It was a reference to the know-how of Ukrainian intelligence, and you also mark it up, and we talked. I found that such a plan of know-how can be grown. I am a democratic power, like a power that fights for aggression. And an aggressive power, aggression, slip in the hay in the circle at such an hour. That patent of Ukrainian you set the speed of special services for Zasuna to Russian. And PPR is one power in the world, including with the received states, we cannot fill in the pro-government strategic facilities. With the received in the state in America 4 nuclear facilities, concerns about Americans and the dollar. And I give the Europeans and the euro not to the fact that you are Russians to the full. And here we are bashing Russia's combined attack on the Western Suite overgrown. Persia craply aggressive blowing on the spirits of Western Philistines, politicians of the temples. And I think I'm overgrown, and for the sake of the spec of the Russian Federation. In the General Staff of the Reset Force of the Russian Federation, in the Foreign Intelligence Service. To discuss the power positions on the essence of the flooring to President Putin and on the Tilka about Ukraine. On Tilka about Ukraine. I think that the President of the Russian Federation should discuss Ukraine with the head of the People's Republic of China. For a moment with enthusiasm. One important moment of the hybrid attack is the launch of unmanned aerial vehicles. From the territory of Russia, through the territory of Ukraine and Byelorussia. For attacks on the territory of the Vorozhi of Ukraine in Central Europe. Such to Poland. Persia is such an attack manually. Russia can act such attacks of Yak missile defense and Poland, as well as about Romania and neighboring Sky Rukina Pavidality at times. On the territory of Ukraine. And Trump, that in truth the Ukrainians attacked Russian drones, those Russian drones attacked Ukrainian objects. And the Ukrainians attacked them, they were not real, and came to Poland in a lost. Well, I'm swearing, I'm Russian soldiers blocking in the forests of Ukraine, and explained that he got lost here and on the boss. And got lost, and we still gave Russians. Roth's body. That's how drones blink. Extremely up to the Persia of such an attack in Poland, I think they will come up with it. But the attacks have already been carried out by combat and drones behind the room of the temple objects. And the Namagani are covered by the windy stretch of the bins of the patch airfield in the neck. In the hub of the Ukrainian-American services. Once again, show President Trump. One attack. Friend Bilsh attack on Habna. And such Russians may not be recognized. Pulling on the windy just neighboring countries. From the fact that Russian Kola was Bulow in Estonia, you took 3 pieces and headed for the Estonian capital of Tallinn. The future intelligence politum and that photographer of Estonian military facilities. In general, the dates on the drone are 4 real strikes. Well, you're a horseshoe drone. Before Russia's involvement, I will not be arrogant. Well, today's appearance of Russian military pilots in the windy just beat the American state of Alaska. Vaccinated Donald Trump of that very state. David had the entire Hannibal summit in the President with the staff received in the Russian Federation. I demonstrated and adored President Putin to end this war and expanded it. So the prices of Tilka European Union and NATO in Europe. The Czechs are both windy about the average between the Russian Federation and with the received states. I think we will beat the same wreck on the windy just by hitting and at a gathering, say, between the Russian Federation and Japan. Is it that my total stats are to blame? Such a hybrid fault, my stat is like that. Well, and the third and important point, tied from the double apparatus according to Russian, and that in Denmark. The Cobb was attacked at Copenhagen Airport, sharing in a drone. So they covered the windy stretch of Denmark and closed the Copenhagen airfield. And overgrown 3 nights, there was a share in the bucket drone at the Kilkama airfield and the Jutland pub. He himself is about the airfield of Aalborg, low airfields, and spilled drones over the temple object and Denmark over the Crimea. Over places and the base of the F-35 pilots. In Denmark, in C, shouting out an incredible, I would say, sturbovenness of the thesis. Do not go to the tribute to the political today in the rant, there was a press conference of the Danish Minister of Defense. And writing to her press conferences from the tonsure of Chippet chairs, even in she is higher on the patterns. The Hromadian of Denmark below has disturbed them to the fact that it has become absolutely obvious that the Uriat of Denmark is not, of course, Iamin and Richley, who was infected in Copenhagen with torture. Why, with such a fineness, a penny is spent on a temple budget with expensive temple equipment? Without a clear understanding of the yak, these drones are found. Yaks are sold from cover on windy simply and fear. And you, of course, why it was so. There is still no one ready to such a knot, and again so. Those drones are obviously both hanging out in Denmark, and up to neighboring Norway hanging out. I covered up on a windy day and didn't hang out. I was talking about drones over temple objects, and France is hanging out, where they talked about unmanned vehicles over temple objects. I just literally sprat years before our broadcast that they are launched from the territory of those same Ukrainians. They don't fly through greedy on windy weather. And it's skin to serious moment, Yaki. And again, at a press conference, today's head of the Danish National Police, Torkel Forga, said that there were a number of exhibitions about a hybrid attack on ambushes of the extreme Tinka situation. However, the attack on Zeebrugge failed. And important points need to be said. Well, in Denmark, the famous pit stops at a time, the very paradigm of the Danish defense policy is famous. Denmark firm 4 military strike long-range drop. Richly Ukraine. NATO does not claim to be a force there. The torture is that someone in Denmark has overgrown richly, tying strikes with the fact that a long-range shock dump. And Denmark for Ukraine. And firm the post of Gacha in Copenhagen can councillors. Well, this is how they test Azerbaijani politicians at press conferences. Chipovyaza those attacks on the far so that Ukraine will hear with such a rank and without resetting. And demonstrate that Ukraine in those situations cannot be ensured, and there will be yaks on the European Ukraine. And maybe it still wants to pit hybrid attacks and Tilke. That's the criminal problem. And at a time, not as a kind of lead to torture, I will develop into a situation of actually attacking tribute. And you are civil airfields, yes, such old. Vikova base in the script with a corpse there at 35. Such things are more real in Copenhagen, so tell him, literally a sprat, in the case of the Ministry of Birth Certificates in Latvia. Biba Brazy was informed in an interview with the agency Rada. Denmark also informed its allies about the incident with the drone. And there is a sovereign entity in Denmark. Well, we are, of course, still for a sovereign subject. And Danish Defense Minister Lars Rasmussen, a well-known politician, Prime Minister of Ukraine, said that it was not so. I do not know the scrolls all the information. We can't address to whom that we have Bachil and Donny have revolt days. You can also send your own software, we are still talking about Russia. We can't attribute to someone then drones, and actually God's spirit. Well, and you, of course, are still not fond of calling your names. While the embassy of the Russian Federation has already received information about the strength to the workshop on the Cobb of Kola. There was a story with the Copenhagen airport of the CIA, Ambassador Vladimir Babry himself. Babrin today in an interview in the Daniel Yulin Post of the Central Committee simply forgot the embassy of the Russian Federation in Copenhagen extremely. The absurd thinks that this is Russia absurd, then it is known that this is a skin and real situation. Well, I would like to tell you that there is a fourth one. We have already named 3, and the fourth is a cyberattack on European airports and Zahid airports. Allegedly this was also sounded. I think that drones can still be thoroughly used in this system of cyber attacks and infrastructure systems, a state of chaos. All of this, in principle, is tied up with the adoration of interrupted flights, transportation montages. And I read the proverb of Russian political scientists about the fact that such a real fault is hybrid. Even on the skin idea, with a direct on the prit of Russia, Russia will see, and that's how adequately. But that's why I'm still Ukraine attacks and drones be on the air receipt of the Russian Federation, and bring supposedly, of course, as on the lead in Ukraine itself aviation firm receipt to May. I want to deduct so that it doesn't get attacked by our climbed so much. So in those situations, we are still interrupted by air travel in Europe. Well, so that's the fourth point after all. And PPR torture I'm all protesting. What is the important torture for? Well, according to the requirement to say that the yak is protesting to the pilots there, well, not in NATO, of course. There and protocols Ayubachila raise their or and chase or and imperious on windy just. So it was in Estonia, so it was in Alaska. Obviously, Putin does not want to sell his adoration until he gets away with ideas. Well, President Trump, having now told his Zustrick with President Zelensky, with President Macron, what to sell or so, and saying that with the receipt of the United States will help Ukraine with NATO. Furnished. Well, what can I tell you? Although at least here the infection is still too early, the chip can be so insanely excessive. I had my hour with drones richly Gersha, of course. The SS countries of the countries from Ukraine are members of NATO. They absolutely do not prepare for such a situation. Well, just not ready. And it is absolutely obvious that everyone will recognize the speech there, and the defense minister spoke to NATO in the same way. Then the Ukrainian Viskovs will forget the stitches of their Polish colleagues in a beard with an unmanned one. Richly I ask. I would like to see signs of a positive reaction here, let's say from Rodoslav Sikorsky's proposition, so that Ukraine. NATO members could shoot down Russian drones and missiles across the windy expanse of Ukraine. And you know that you are sorry to see the Polish law. Representatives of the Polish structure and NATO. Even the right, having said, thoughtful moment in this situation. Obviously. Such a moment. Another moment. The fact that it will be possible in Maybutna, we think, and it is possible for it to be about a Son stretch controlled by the Polish and Ukrainian overnight state against windy defense, at least in the west of Ukraine. Progressive Krok. The drone is launched from the territory of the most in NATO. Sasha Pashukov needs serious work as an agent. And we, of course, still have the Russian Federation as a body. I already find that these drones can be launched from the sea in some kind of decline there in the building from Ukraine. The average weekend is see that there are options here. And the task, extorting a solution. Then it will become even more difficult to read in the days of Denmark. I read interviews with the politics of the temple experts, yes. Poe is still in Copenhagen of a clear understanding, like in such a situation, on the fact that from the summer, with cyber attacks and with all this, it is possible to fit in with the fact that I am a kind of visible torture. But drones are a technological turn in Vienna, and I think that there may be few such turns yet. The wine has continued. And you and I have just overgrown the power of the picture of Putin's hybrid guilt against the sunset. And Putin says that maybe because of the technical nature of the visits to the meeting of the Rada in the Russian Federation, then in fact, what he wants is not yet the coal of guilt, so the prelude to guilt. That's the whole picture I want to show you at today's Chaga attack. The Russians, obviously. On Denmark, I am a respected Russian, I have declared President Trump. Firm information about the fact that they are represented in Britain, in France they are not marked for Zustrici from Moscow. The chairs have not yet invaded the windy Estonia, yet it was a special decision of the Russian Viskovs that Russia tore off a rigid agenda for the purpose of departure to the Russian Vishiv and drones from the windy expanse of Europe. And in the workshops European diplomats said Russia is still ready to sell and faces. In fact, so is the real smell of guilt, because I don't think they brought Putin down much. Maybe you don't want him to have, I would say he had a precedent, let's say like this. So in a serious speech. Before the speech from the tick, the information of the command for the wind forces of NATO Ugrik, and the Visha of the Russian temple Lyaki was still announced. The Russian at 1 o'clock 30 Su-35 and 3 MiG-31 flew over the Baltic Sea, and out of the windy expanse of the Republic of Latvia. Are important for such a moment. I will ask you to subscribe to the channel. I will be in your pay to those who have not subscribed. Diakuya for I will sign Diak no skin. What else did we hear from only 40,000? I subscribe millions to the channel, and you can become one of the 40,000, so I will be happy for you. Put a weasel in a podobake, put likes, comment on what you think about the new phase of guilt. The veins have already been opened in Europe. These are the channel tools. And I'm on the types of ether, already ass is not on extremely. You seem to think that all of Ukraine's NATO is armed for Putin, and I'm not economical juices from Russia. It's too much for NATO's schizophrenia for Ukraine. But listen. And that you are cleaning and words, and call them weapons for the Russian Federation. I would say that Erdogan is helping brigades from Ukraine helping us economically, and sweeps Ukraine, they should have been tied up. It sweeps beautifully. And Fitz's Orbans didn't do any of that. In the views will help Ukraine, for no one take on this schizophrenia, in such schizophrenia as heavy stripes. It is extremely economical for Ukraine to carry bags from the Russian Federation with it. And for Trump Erdogan. And I also respected it normally, but a recent hour. I would now say that here I am actually supplying Ukraine's dumps, which I would say is more comfortable than the minds of Russian oligarchs who were kicked out to enter. And for Putin's kind of food on the Ukraine pub, I'm going to enter the gates of mines for you. That's it. But Erdogan also helps us. Territorial tells from Ukraine, but with a sample of Erdogan and riding discounts in the Crimea. Just kicked out annexation on the island of Katerina, and a friend, and everything is remembered. Erdogan now believes in such a policy, and I respect the ideal one. There is still such a policy there, and I was so inclined to believe in such a policy, but everything is so and the fact is so. With a primate, yak fact. The ranks of Chechia Trump are already the third kind of Putin's mask that the Commission will continue to keel again. And imperiously without an act. It is said richly, and so on. But Trump, having said that he is taken out with Putin in a month, so theoretically I seem to have some ideas. I'll have a check for the 25th, will serve another 23rd or 24th. And I really adore Trump. The formula is viscose until she eats 4 European pennies. It's unlikely that in 3 months, And we can also allow the Europeans to strike offensive drops for the Ukrainian army, and on the defense Tilka. There may be treason in politics. For Europeans it is necessary, and I will tell you buckets, that about the hybrid wine of Russia, about the entry today. I talked in such detail. I think we're going to tell you now. Hybrid. That you had no illusion, it happens. Chances for what? I'd say it's overgrown. For real guilt in Europe up to 60-100. Well, Malti is on the was of Ukraine in Central Europe, and Zahid is France, after all. Nuclear Ukraine has already flown to German bases. You rent out Russian objects. Not sovereign. Here. So in the dark plan, it won't change anyway. And even before economical sanctions, but of course, not yet bright economical sanctions will not change the situation. That China is not theirs. But with the already rich tools received in the state, I will sail to China to India. Trump can be stamped on Orban and theoretically on Erdogan. Already so. And Xi Jinping can't have 1,000, but we can still roll it out. I'm in favor of a defense tariff. I'm still Trump to roll him out. For defense, you are a prod of liquid metal magnets, often on the temple fishing. With the strategic fishing received in the state for ever is simply worth it. And respects, and you are still Trump-o psychotype. Yeah, with pubic surrender to the strong, in the context of rhetoric even before Russia. At the same time, make it clear that Trump's rhetoric is easier to reach Russia due to the fact that you have, in fact, entered the def on the platform. I don't think I respect Russia as weak below Ukraine. If they just respect Russia for 3.5 years, and in one place with their head against the wall in fact, then this is absolutely unproductive. Still print and talk, and about that I really finish this situation. But I don't think that's the idea. Slabkova I am strong. I think Erdogan is for Erdogan, Trump is for this fact. And the Russian-Ukrainian guilt is clearly visible for him. Respects another point on the turn. The third part of the blame is due to Ryden, who respects the activities of the call, and with Russia. I have long respected the point on top of the cob of the third light guilt on the raid. But I think that you and I are extremely guilty of the blame. I am not a wholly fault similar to each other. This is a total fault with the tank and the aircraft, the blow and there on Berlin, on Riz and London tables. In Rakov honestly, so also about the god of the opposing antiquities, and on China, the third-party cores on the harness. The wines can also be locally hybrid in nature. And it can be global. And there will be such a form of third light guilt. Shitiki historians, of course, called, and the torture will come. Then the historian, it began the third holy wine. What are you, of course, also the date of the cob of Persia of holy guilt, and the date of the cob of a friend and holy guilt. You appointed retroactively. When you start, no one says, oh, you know, the holy wine has begun. Do not say that Russia began to fight from the Otto-Ugric region. Often the cleaning service sent an ultimatum to Serbia, and not Meckel, it in the 39th kind attacked Poland. And no one says, oh, holy wine. The wrong yak. So let's not rush you. That you were still in the Ukrainian YouTube with us for the temple period. Not all political channels and bloggers of you were out of defense, that the whole of Ukraine accepted your very point of view. But I'm telling you from the Shire that you adore still similar to a schizophrenic. In principle, you know the most prominent thing that I am through the screen, but I can't objectively myself. Trump, let's say, he can't objectively look at him through the screens of the exhibition and respecting food. My point of view needs to be closed, and I'll be sitting here and diluting myself. It would still be possible for no one to hear. I can dilute the hearing with myself, and with myself. This is the perfect option. About the power of the spirit. Which is serious. Does the temple period have effective temple censorship? I myself have information about military facilities, about not hitting important for the defense of Ukraine in the facilities. As you know, it's not a one-time thing in ours. Reportage. And in the register of entrepreneurship with a specific address like that, let's do this for sure. The addresses are literally up to the number so that you don't fly anywhere there. One time that I'm firm, the 2014 rock seems to be a bottle of Viskov censorship. Still in Israel, but after all, I am a terrorist act, and it is possible to behave in the media. With the permission of the temple censorship, I will already punish about the fact that there is guilt. What kind of objects are there? What kind of photos are there? What are there on the temples are frequent. But it is allowed. There is still a political shade of the situation of guilt. Not yak is not tied for the defense of the surrender of Ukraine. And people can have a carved point of view. Absolutely no speech is tied. So we can't hold elections about the inefficiency of a political Ukraine row. We are undermining the Yakimshina defense of Ukraine. But I am still an ineffective president in Ukraine. Not an effective prime minister, minister of justice. I do not know who for anything. What is the problem, and who is more efficient than the system? On a serious solo discussion in an hour, I'm not going to swim in and on Vlad. Not this is not electoral yet, of course. But we said that we could hold elections. I'm not an objective counselor. In the 20s, the fact that everyone knows exactly what is with Vlad. It doesn't happen that way. And we removed the mechanism with you and Vlad in the chat on us like rabbits. Well, here is the will of the Ukrainian people. The experiment will continue, and the future will continue. Richly, not simple. And I, Yak, cannot understand why no one can speak, and what is needed, abandoning both political channels and extremely. The information I'm going to start with propaganda, that is, the destabilization of Russia, and the main task of dismantling Ukraine. I'll tell you now, do not give Willy everywhere Russian propaganda in Ukraine. In Europe, you can't have a greedy Russian propaganda Telegram channel. I will already punish about anonymous Telegram channels, and so obviously you will think to rich people from the office, and Yaki, in fact, will lead a life not verified, but extortion with not verified, and but also Russian propaganda channels. If they were given out as Ukrainian. It's just really fucking hard work. And I know for sure that I find that the channels are not needfully occupied, and not verified not on you, and turned off with informative just. That's all. It seemed to you that democracy is chosen by syllable. You still believe in and master the beards with a drone, and before I fall asleep them. And I master drone fighting. I have no problem in mastering Borodiba from a drone. I'm just really calling there. Well, you're a drone, right? And out and beat. So I'm absolutely calm here. The guilt of Russia against Ukraine, for Ukraine is a competitor in the light markets. And respects and who would not have stepped. The Russian Federation Nikola did not accept Ukraine as a competitor in the light markets. Because from the point of view of the Russian president and the people, it is not ostensibly Ukraine as a competitor for a clear, but a clear sprat. The group of regions of the Russian Federation is called Ukraine. Those areas and caused no kind of call, I will come to Russia, and as if not a competitor, but often on the Russian economy. And the Hromadians live in those territories, my stats are with normal Russians, and are against the benefit of the Russian economy. Absolutely, what do you think I'm thinking in Russia? I am a real power respecting Ukraine, you will wash up. The Russian chauvinistic Ukraine was born, and this is just a misunderstanding eliminated by a political power gentry. So it's not like Ukraine, it's not a competitor. Everything is Russian, from Uzhgorod to Kharkiv. Everything is Russian, it's Russian. The Russian spirit smells of Russia. And we are with you, dear, otherwise, it's your fault and exist differently. Russia is for liquidating the Ukrainian state, and those who will be a counselor to Ukrainians. I will not respect what will be heard here in this situation. And here the whole story is not about the economy. She's in a corner before the economy on no one to see. The whole story is about history, about identification, and seeing off the control of Europe by the nobility. That Russia will control the entire Russian land. I do not respect Ukraine and Belarus. So I'm going to be Europe, and I'm going to control Russia on the leader. So much for the view. I respect this Mayan. NATO intelligence is more realistic than tribute at the moment. Even before Russia's readiness to launch a nuclear reset and a NATO missile defense at the time of the conflict. I think that overgrown is not the bolt of the nuclear reset, and I will repeat it again. The two sides will lead tens of millions of people to look into the time of the nuclear dump and the bill firm the territory of Ukraine. Will pretend to drink. There will be a conflict for the minds of I can be thrust into a strategically nuclear dump. Tactfully nuclear reset, and there is no such problem, but really there was a catastrophe. Allegedly it is possible to be jealous with a bulged tactfully nuclear reset. So I think this is purely political torture in fact. And I'm going to tell you that shvij for everything today, we can say another third holy guilt. Maybe I'm between local conflicts. Then I'm a hybrid guilt, supposedly not a hybrid looks there, but it's possible for a hybrid. Everything will be like this map of guilt at 20. And that it can be. And I won't be their 4 or 5 rocky light friends' fault, and it may be in 2030. Is this serious? Well, that is, for 20 years of wine, you know. Well, we are unlikely to have a chat with you, and so I do not praise, but we will live in the soul. I promise you. It's just important that the intensity of guilt in our territory is less, 3.5 rocky will be lower. Having said that, the maximum task is still possible. So far I've been sounding off. An important point. Well, so that's what we're going to lie in wait with you because I metastasize everywhere, yak for the protest. Trump is still rich. And overgrown, I will ask you to subscribe to the channel. I will be in your diagny skin who will subscribe. Guessing we go to the channel millions, and I think that for our scope with you. We have already thought of new subscribers on the topic of the channel, I will be glad to balk. But now there is no ether tag, so sign the weasel, because we have already heard less than 40,000. Who is not subscribed, comment, put in a podobake with the tools of the channel. Well, I extremely want to ask you to help the Ukrainian dumped. That's even before the Ukrainian dumped forces. I am starting with the survival of the Ukrainian state, the Ukrainian people's offensive fate, and the guilt of light conflicts. You.